All right, today we're tackling a really big one. We're diving into The Garden of Afflictions by the Brazilian author Olavo de Carvalho. Now, this is a seriously dense and, let's be honest, controversial book. It kicks off with a small local event and then just spirals out to cover 2,000 years of Western history, all to build towards a single, pretty staggering point about the state of the modern mind. Right from the jump, the author hits us with this powerful distinction. See, for him, the big intellectual battle we're in isn't just about who's right and who's wrong. He's arguing that there's a much more dangerous force out there, something that doesn't just feed you a lie, but actually damages your ability to think clearly, to reason. It basically makes you immune to the truth. And that idea, that's the key to understanding everything that follows. So where does this massive 2,000-year argument begin? You might expect some huge historical event, right? A war, a revolution. Nope. It starts with something much, much smaller, a series of ethics lectures held at an art museum in Sao Paulo. Olavo de Carvalho basically puts this conference under a microscope, and he argues that the organizers made some very specific, very revealing choices. For instance, they spend a lot of time on Epicurus, a philosopher he sees as pretty marginal, while completely ignoring the absolute giants of Western ethics. We're talking Plato, Aristotle, the Stoics. Just gone. And when they finally did get to the Middle Ages, 1,000 years of thought was boiled down to one thing: the Inquisition. For the author, this isn't just some academic oversight. He sees it as a deliberate strategy to paint a very particular, very warped picture of history. And this is where you really start to get the book's whole method. Carvalho uses this one conference like a key. He's saying, if we can just figure out why this specific event happened this way, with these exact choices, we can trace back the long, deep historical and philosophical currents that made it possible. This tiny event, in his view, unlocks a much, much bigger story. So, all of this analysis leads Olavo to what he sees as the central conflict of the book, a massive struggle for really the soul of the West, and it's a battle being fought between two very different kinds of thinkers. Okay, so on one side, you've got the classic philosopher. Think Plato, think Aristotle. According to the book, their number one goal is truth. They follow the evidence and reason, no matter where it takes them. But on the other side, you have what Carvalho calls the Philosophe. This is his special term for an ideologue, like Voltaire or the guys from the French Revolution. For them, the goal isn't truth, it's power. It's about using words and rhetoric not to explain the world, but to rally the troops and win the argument. And it's so important that we get this term, the Philosophe, right? We're not just talking about any intellectual here. We're talking about someone who wraps themselves in the language of philosophy, but their real goal is political ambition. For Carvalho, this type of figure is absolutely essential to understanding our modern world, a world where he believes the quest for influence has all too often shoved the real search for wisdom right out of the way. So this ongoing battle between the truth seekers and the power seekers? Well, according to the author, it went into overdrive in the 20th century. The philosophers developed a whole new arsenal for a totally new kind of war, a war for your mind. Now that is a really bold claim. Think about it. More than the nuclear age, more than the information age, Carvalho calls the 20th century the age of mental enslavement. He's arguing that the biggest breakthroughs weren't in physics or technology, but in the creation of sophisticated techniques designed to control and manipulate how people think, and to do it on a massive scale. To explain this, the book points to the work of the Russian physiologist Ivan Pavlov. Now, you've probably heard about him conditioning dogs to drool at the sound of a bell, but the truly shocking discovery was what happened next. When Pavlov's team started sending contradictory signals, rewarding and punishing the dogs at random for the same thing, it created this incredible psychological stress. And here's the kicker. To escape that pain, the subject's entire personality could literally flip. A friendly dog might suddenly despise its owner, while cozying up to a lab assistant it used to fear. And that, the author argues, became the blueprint for modern brainwashing. And that basic principle, the book claims, was weaponized. It became this whole arsenal of manipulation tools. We're talking subliminal messages in ads, neurolinguistic programming, or NLP, used in everything from therapy to sales, and even what the author calls a psychosis of information created by the relentless 24/7 media cycle. The alleged goal of all these things? To completely bypass your rational mind and influence your behavior directly. And for the author, this right here is the whole point. It doesn't matter what you're being conditioned for, whether it's for a conservative cause or a revolutionary one. The end result is the same. The moment you start treating human beings like animals to be trained, you degrade their consciousness. You're no longer dealing with a free person. So when an entire society gets saturated with these kinds of manipulation techniques, what rushes in to fill the vacuum? According to the author, it's a powerful, all-consuming new kind of faith, one that he says has essentially replaced traditional religion in the West. He gives this new faith a name, the divinization of history. What does that mean? It's the belief that the ultimate purpose of your life, the thing that gives it all meaning, isn't found in God or in eternity or anything transcendent. No, your meaning comes from your role in the great march of historical progress, from being on the right side of history.
Now, here's a crucial point. Olavo doesn't see this as a problem on just one side of the political aisle. He actually argues that modern socialism and Western democratic capitalism are just two different flavors of the same religion. Think about it. One promises a future paradise in a classless society, the other promises it in a global market of universal prosperity. But in both systems, he claims, the life of the individual person, right now, is made less important than achieving that grand future goal. And all of this leads us to the book's final and, frankly, most provocative argument. What happens to the individual, to the family, and to our personal freedom when all these huge ideological forces come crashing down on us? The author makes the case that the modern state has an interest in weakening what he calls intermediate structures. These are all the groups that stands between you and the government. Things like your family, your church, your local community, even your circle of friends. As these natural bonds get weaker and dissolve, what are you left with? Just the isolated individual, standing alone, face to face with the immense power of the state. And this gets us to a really mind-bending paradox at the end of the book. Olavo de Carvalho claims that even the language of human rights can be twisted to serve this purpose. Here's how. Every time a new right is created, a new government agency has to be formed to define it, regulate it, and enforce it. The result, he argues, is that the state gets a green light to intervene in more and more intimate areas of our lives, from how we raise our kids to what we do in private, and it's all done in the name of protecting our rights. So in the end, the Garden of Afflictions leaves us with this massive question. It suggests that all the big conflicts we see playing out in politics and culture, maybe they're just diversions. Maybe the real war, the final battle, isn't being fought on land or at sea, but inside each of us, in the struggle to hold on to a free, thinking, and independent consciousness in the face of all these forces trying to confuse, control, and command it.
All right, let's break down Olavo de Carvalho's controversial book, The Garden of Afflictions. Right from the start, this quote sets a pretty heavy tone for what's to come. So the whole thing starts with just one lecture series, used to critique 2,000 years of history. So here's our roadmap. We'll follow the author's argument right from that initial spark. It all kicks off in 1990, a series of public lectures that, for the author, changed everything. He argues that right here, the present, collided with the deep past, a truly pivotal moment. Now this is central to his argument, a distinction between two very different kinds of thinkers. He pits the truth-seeking philosopher against the agenda-driven Philosophe, who he says ran the show. And here's his proof. He says they're twisting history to fit their own narrative. So for him, the bottom line is clear. This wasn't education. It was a deliberate strategy. Okay, so that begs the question, how exactly is this worldview pushed onto the public?
He points to Pavlov, claiming this incoherent stimulation is a key technique to break people down.
Another tool he brings up, subliminal messaging, designed to influence you without you even knowing it.
And it doesn't stop there. He also points to hypnosis and NLP to bypass our judgment.
I mean, this quote really says it all about his view of the 20th century.
The end result, he warns, is what he calls a universal empire of imposture.
From here, the book zooms out to a much bigger theory about secret societies shaping history. He claims you can see this shift in our stories, from eternal salvation to earthly success.
This creates a new order where he says a hidden elite holds the real power.
He calls this the ultimate inversion. Our purpose becomes totally material, not spiritual at all.
So where is all this heading?
Well, the final section of the book is a warning.
He predicts the breakdown of community, leaving individuals isolated and dependent on the state. So, what's the final result of a society built like this? It's a heavy question.
And this quote really gets to his main point. The real fight is for our own minds.
The book leaves us with this final thought. In our world, who's really writing the script?